بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جاءته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. أسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهه الكريم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We welcome you to another session of our Black History Month dialogues. Tonight is Real Talk with our brother Ustad Shaykh Dr. Abdullah bin Hamid Ali from Lamppost Education Initiative. We are going to have a talk in general to learn about his history and his work and his ideas and his thoughts, and discussion and open dialogue between brothers in faith and a listening audience and attendees. And we're going to open up for questions for you as well. But first, we want to get to know Shaykh Abdullah and what he wishes to give us about himself and his work. Tafadhal Sayyidi.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, once again, it's an honor to be able to take part in an important conversation about our community with you, Shaykh Amin, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He preserve you and give success to your efforts. But as you stated, my name is Abdullah bin Hamid Ali. My father's name was Hamid Mahmoud Ali. He was a former member of the Nation of Islam, and he actually was part of what we call the first resurrection, both he and my mother, Majida. And they, may Allah, may they both rest in peace. That they themselves were my introduction to Islam. Of course, I was born shortly prior to the death of Elijah Muhammad and me and my other siblings, or 3 sisters, my 3 brothers. We were raised in a family where we probably could say we're more like cultural Muslims. And the most that we knew about Islam at the time was Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. And none of us had actually seen an actual Quran until late in our years. And what I mean by that, an Arabic Quran. But in my early teenage years, once we moved to Philadelphia from Chicago, I was born in Philadelphia, but then went straight to Chicago after that, and grew up my first 10, 11 years in Chicago. Then we went back to Philadelphia, and I was a break dancer at the time, and so I'd eventually joined a crew in Philly, a break dance group. They discovered me. I used to come out in front of our house. I used to do windmills in the middle of the street. They had my little cardboard and everything, and they saw me. Neighbors came up and they said, "Yeah, who's this guy? In town?" So they said, "Hey, man, they invited me to their meetings. They wanted to form a group." So I joined it, and so we would go around the city trying to look for other people we can battle. So one particular time we had challenged this one crew that lived right around the corner from my house, and so lo and behold, they happened to be Muslims. So the mother of the house had discovered that I was a Muslim, so she invited me inside the house, Sister Halima, Allah yarhamha, and I went in and I saw them praying, making salah. Now when I was coming up, the only person in my family that made salah was my father. And so by the time we had come back to Philly, he and my mother were already breaking up. So actually, when I saw this person inside the house making salah, I was really sort of intrigued by it. I said, okay, that's what my father used to do. And so I started to come to their home on a regular basis, and I started to study Islam. And this is my early teens. So I learned salat, we'll do things like that. And then eventually I started to teach myself Arabic. Some years later, I had found the book Easy Tajweed. And then the beginning of that particular book, there was a list of the Arabic alphabet. And I started to try to teach myself. I used to write each letter out 15 times and trying to learn each one of them. And then like about a week later, I discovered, or somebody brought to my attention, that there was a teacher from Eritrea who was teaching at Sister Clara Muhammad School in Philadelphia, teaching Arabic. And so we called him Imam Abarra, Allah yarhamu. He was known as he was a local traveling teacher. He would come to your house, right? He wouldn't charge much money. He would charge people like $5 per lesson, you know. So, and he would come all the way from any part of the city and come to your house. And a lot of people in Philadelphia knew who he was, and they learned from him. And so I started to study with him Arabic, and that's probably was about 16 and 17 years old. And then after about a year of study with him, I basically reached a point where he could no longer explain to me certain constructs in English, which were related to Arabic. But at that very time, Shaykh Abdullah bin Hamid and his brother Anas, may Allah preserve them, they actually were starting up the Kuba Institute, and which originally was the International Muslim Brotherhood, and they changed it to the Kuba Institute. And they started an Arabic course. And so I joined their Arabic course to learn that particular style of learning with respect to Arabic. But I also studied other things with them. I studied Quran with them. I had already, prior to even joining the classes, I already memorized 2 juz of Quran on my own. I had sat with mostly with Ustaz Anas to do more memorization and also tajweed, studied with them some things related to sirah, hadith, and fiqh, and aqidah, and there are also other places I was studying. There's another brother who was a former student at the University of Pennsylvania. His name is Abdullah bin Muhammad, who also was teaching Arabic and would come to Cuba, and so he was teaching what we call the Red Book, the Elementary Modern Standard Arabic, which many people call the CIA book, and it was a very good book. Of course, it had some flaws in it, but I actually was through study of that book with him was how I learned how to read without vowels. So I would spend a lot of time, personal time, sitting at home, hours in my room with the books and with the dictionary, Hans Wehr. Just trying to work my way through different texts that I had interest in. And so I studied, hadith and other things as well. And then eventually what happened was I decided at a certain point that I was going to go after I finished high school. Naturally, I became a barber. I worked in a couple of barbershops. Actually, matter of fact, 3 different barbershops. I worked in a few different barbershops. And then the last barbershop I was working at, I had started studying at Temple University. I went in with a major in computer science, believe it or not. I was somewhat trying to run away from what everybody thought that I wanted, that I actually had the knack for. So I went to Temple University. First year, I was very focused on my computer science studies. Then in the second year, I discovered the Arabic section of the library. And what I also was doing while I was there, I was studying graduate level courses with Dr. Khalid Blankenship, Intro to Islam and other types of issues related to Islamic jurisprudence. And also we would sit in his office from certain days and we would read the texts like the Sharh of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, Fawakih al-Dawani, of Nafrawi. We would work through them. And other books, we worked through the sections of the Ibn Ishaq, the Sirah of Ibn Ishaq. So we was probably a private study and also inside the classroom. But anyway, what happens in the second year, after discovering many of the books that intrigued me in the Arabic section of the library, I decided one night when I was at work, because I worked as a security guard. After being a barber, I worked as a security guard at the hospital actually a couple of hospitals in North Philadelphia. The one was the St. Joseph Hospital, and also the Girard Medical Center. Right, we would sort of shift from one location to another. So at the Girard Medical Center, of course, I was up on the top lot one night, well, actually it was early in the morning because I worked the night shift. I was listening to one of Sheikh Hamza's his tapes, which was the prerequisites of a mujtahid. I think you can still find it on YouTube, but this is probably the first lecture that I heard from him and I really liked. And because prior to that, I heard something from him and I really wasn't interested in what he had to say, but he was very fired up on this one and it was very impressive. So at the next morning, when I went to school, went to class, I went to Dr. Khalid Menkish's office. I told him, I said, I think I need to go overseas now. Now, going overseas, this wasn't the first time I actually had the idea of going overseas. About 2 years earlier than that, I was actually prepared to go to Egypt. There were some brothers who worked down on 52nd Street in Philadelphia. They're doing on this trip. Imam Hanif, Ali, and there was Brother Sharif, I think it's Shaykh Abdullah, and Ali, subhanAllah, I forget Ali's last name. But, these were my old heads. They were twice my age. I used to hang out with them quite a bit. And a lot of other people were encouraging me to go overseas, to go study. They saw that I had the knack for it. Diya bin Yahya, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was encouraging me to go over as well, so I decided, okay, well, the people had ideas, maybe where should I go? Some people, go to Medina. And I said, okay, I'll go to Medina. And then they'll change their mind. Oh, maybe Medina is not the best for you. We should go to Azhar. I say, okay, I'll go to Azhar. Right. So eventually what happens is that Brother Sharif and some of the other brothers, they got together a bunch of money and they bought me a one-way ticket to Egypt. So I actually wasn't accepted into the program, but this is—
How old were you at that time?
1994, probably, I think I was probably maybe 22, 23.
Okay.
Right. So I got the ticket. They bought a one-way ticket, and I made Hajj in 93. So this is probably a year right after that. So 93, I think I was 21. So maybe I was 22, 93. I don't know exactly what the math. You got to do the math later. But at any rate, they bought a one-way ticket, and I decided, I'm going to go. And this is prior to me going to Temple. So the day right before I was going to leave, one of the brothers came to my house, pulled me out, sat me in his car, and he begged me not to go. Right? And he said that, we're afraid that you're going to go over there, starve, you don't have any extra support. And I was like serious. I was adamant. I said, I'm going. If he's really lie, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to knock on the door, telling them that I want to study the deen. And, but after an hour of debate back and forth, I finally caved in and I decided, okay, I'm not going to go. But I had also another sign too, because that very week leading up to the trip, I didn't feel nervous at all, but something was happening with my stomach, right? My stomach was I couldn't keep food down that particular week. I would eat something, then it would burn my stomach and I would vomit. But then after I decided not to go, it stopped immediately once I stopped, even though I didn't feel like nervous or any type of anxiety about the situation at all. But anyway, so after that is when I went to Temple. And then after 2 years at Temple, Dr. Khalid, he had suggested that I go to Morocco, study at Qarawiyyin, one of the oldest universities, if not the oldest university in the Muslim world. Some say the world itself, because he said, we don't know anybody who studied there, so maybe you should go there. So he wrote me a letter because he had a relationship with some of the people in the Moroccan government, because the king had invited him over for a couple of times for what we call Durus al-Hasaniyah, the lessons delivered in front of the king. And so I went there. I visited the sort of the general secretary's office, gave him the letter, and he told me, okay, no problem. Once you come back, you will be able to go to school. Because I visited in the summer, for about 2 weeks just to see what Morocco looks like. And then I came back, and so I was supposed to go back around September. Eventually did go back, and then I started the program, even though there are some bumps on the way, naturally. So I studied the Sharia program, and I went on the weekends. I would go and I would study with the ulama, some of the ulama in the Karasi Almiya and the Jami' and the Central Mosque on the weekends, usul and other things. I had some private classes with some of my teachers, Jarumiyya, among other issues. Studied privately with Shaykh Muhammad Tawil, Allah yarhamu, which is the Ibn Ashir and aspects of the Mukhtasar al-Shaykh Khalil in his home. And then I graduated, came back in 2001, right before 9/11, about a month prior before 9/11. and I was teaching at the Cuba Institute for about a year. And then at the end of that year, the opportunity had arisen for me to get the job as a chaplain in the prison in Chester, Pennsylvania. I accepted that role, and I had that role for about 5 years. And at the end of my 5th year, I received an invitation from Imam Zaid to come to California to teach at Zaytuna, because Zaytuna had decided that they're going to go start a new college, and they felt that they needed some people with some type of credentials that would help give them some credibility and to help them to plan the opening of the college. So, and I've been here since then. And what I've also done since then is I've gone to a graduate school, and I got my MA in ethics and social theory, and also my PhD in cultural and historical studies in Islam. I mean, cultural and historical studies in religion, cultural and historical studies in religion. So, and that's pretty much where I'm at the moment. Currently, I teach at Zaytuna. I teach the usul al-fiqh. I teach commercial law, what we call al-buyur, al-mu'amalat. I teach family law. I teach inheritance law. And in the honors program, I also teach the principles of tasawwuf from the books like the Ibn Murshid Mar'in of Al-Ma'asha, as well as Zubad, the section from Kitab al-Zubad from the Shafi'i scholar. And so, and in usul, I teach the waraqat and the tasheel al-turaqat as well, the sharh of the waraqat, which is actually a poetic form of the waraqat, which I teach the more advanced students at Zaytuna. So that's I think that was quite a bit there, right?
One last question just to add. So when did you start the Lamppost Education Initiative, and what was the push or the motivator for that?
Well, Lamppost, the original ideas about Lamppost came about while I was studying in Morocco. And Brother Luqman Williams, Allah yarhamu, who was from Cleveland, he passed away some years back, and from 2015, I believe, but passed away some years back. Well, maybe not that long ago, but he was a good friend of mine, Brother Luqman Williams. And we were having conversations about issues about what to do and come home. And I had mentioned that I wanted to start like a publishing company, like, Black owned, et cetera, et cetera. And so the name, we used to go by Lamppost Productions, and that was Luqman's idea. We just call it Lamppost Production because it's like you're doing it, you're trying to do something to empower your people, things like that. But of course, what happened was I came back home, and that really didn't really materialize yet. But what did happen at first was I used to actually translate different works, and I would put them in sort of the leaflet forms, and I would take them around to different masajid and try to sell them, right? Just like a sort of a hustler, right, on the street like that. So I used to sell the Hikam of Abdullah bin Hamid, which I translated some years ago, and also the Dafr Shubat Tashbih of which I think probably the first book that you read that I had written, which entitled The Attributes of God. And so I used to sell those that way. Mashallah. Mashallah. Yeah, that needs to be republished as well. But I have to buy the rights back from the publisher. He gave me an offer, but I don't have the money yet. So once I get the money, I will buy it back and publish that again too. Because a lot of people keep asking me about that. But I basically it was around 2004, I think. Brother Khalil Mohsen, we met one another in Philly. And he saw what I was trying to do in terms of trying to get information out to people. He started a Yahoo group called Tariq al-Islam. And on that group, we used to have, myself, I would answer many of the questions pertaining to the Maliki school, on Tariq al-Islam, right? So Tariq al-Islam started to grow. And then eventually, there was one brother from the UK by the name of Aftab Malik, who actually was my boss for a small period of time when I first moved to California, because he originally was one of the executive directors of Zaytuna at the time. But Aftab Malik, who had, came to know me through Tariq al-Islam, and he has this publishing house called Amal Press in the UK, and he asked me, did I have a translated any Maliki works? And I told him, I said, well, not yet, but I do have this translation of Ibn Jawzi's work, which is a refutation against the modern day Salafis. So he said, okay, let's do something with it. And then that's how they got started itself. And then eventually it got published. So basically, it's 2004, after Tariq al-Islam, we eventually started our own website. And we were trying to do publications. We had one of the earliest publications was just simply a small a book, which was a section from a personal commentary I did on Ibn Ashir's creed and some of the matters pertaining to fiqh. Then also I had a book called Muslim Funeral Guide, which inshallah very soon we're going to come out with a second edition of it. And that was written for the purpose of da'wah, a Muslim funeral guide for non-Muslims who have Muslim relatives. Like why Muslims do what they do. So and the thing was interesting about this and somewhat upsetting was when I took the book to one of the main bookstores and clothing stores in Philly, which is, I forgot what do they call it, it's run by the Ismailis there in Philly.
Islamic Press?
The Ahmadis.
Islamic.
The Islamic place, exactly, the Islamic place. Yeah, so I actually took the books. I wanted to sell the books wholesale, and so I took the books down there to have interest, see if they might have interest in picking the books up and selling them. And so he took the owner or the manager took off me about 10 copies of the book, and then he said to me afterwards, "Do you have this on cassette? Yeah, you have like a CD version of this?" And I said, "What do you mean CD version? I mean, like I'm like somebody who's reading the book on a CD." And I was like, no, I mean, why would I have like a book on a CD? A book is for people to open up and read. So, and he said, I said, oh no, I didn't mean any offense. I just want to let you know, because like most of the people who come into the store, they don't really buy books, they buy videos and things like that, and that really crushed me when at that moment, because what my attitude was at the time, leaving Morocco and coming back home, was that there needs to be a response to the Salafi onslaught, right? And they need to have people need to have alternative reading materials so they can have sound creed, et cetera, right? And it's what I noticed about Philly at the time. I don't know what Philly's like now anymore, but at the time, what I noticed was that both Sufi and Salafi were like derogatory terms in Philly to most Muslims, right? Most Muslims, they have Salafi leanings. Most Muslims in Philly have Salafi leanings, but most of them at the time would never, if you called them a Salafi, they would go crazy. They said, I'm not a Salafi. What are you talking about? So you couldn't really approach things. You couldn't talk about Sufism by using the word Sufism, and you couldn't necessarily in most places talk about the way of the Salaf, right? So I said, so it seems that most people are just simply, they're going to grab material on the basis of what they basis of what they think is interesting to them. So I said, okay, alternative material. They're not going to listen to people saying, don't read this and don't read this, don't read this, and so Philly people at the time really didn't seem like that they were inclined in that direction, but it really, what broke my heart was just to have this rude awakening that I said, well, my goodness, my people are not really reading, they don't read, right? And so much of what they learn is just through like videos and cassettes and things like that, So, and I just had overestimated the number of people who actually did read books, And that's not to say that it's only a problem with blacks, It's a problem with most people. Most people don't really read books, or if they do get a book, they may read just sections of the book and not read it in its entirety. So we do definitely have that problem in our community and in our society. But I just was hoping that it would be easier. So what happened because of that, we tried to, okay, we'll do CDs as well, and do lectures. We try to sell those things, and we tried that for a while, and then eventually we shifted to online sort of model, sort of downloads of classes. And then we changed from a for-profit to non-profit a few years ago, and since then we've been just trying to focus on the issues of our on-site and online sort of teachings, and especially in particular our publications. We're coming back to publications, focus on that a bit more, right, rather than just the issues of talks. And even though many of the material, most of the material on the website is somewhat old material, and so that's just where we are at the moment.
So let me go back to your upbringing. So you said that your mother and father were in the Nation of Islam. So when the transition from the Nation of Islam under the leadership of Wafdi Muhammad, rahimahullah, did your family follow that and you grew up in that, or something different?
Exactly. Yeah, they followed Imam W.D. Muhammad, it's hard to say if I grew up in it or not. I think my oldest siblings did. My oldest brother, my oldest sister, and perhaps my second oldest brother. I think that they got a nice little immersion into the first resurrection ideology and doctrine. But once Imam W.D. Muhammad took over, it seemed, and I assumed that my father and mother, they didn't want to impose anything on us, because perhaps they, again, maybe they'll shift again, and maybe they felt tricked. I really never asked them why there wasn't really much emphasis on teaching us mainstream Islam, so other than we knew we're Muslims, and we know the greetings, but we really weren't taught anything else. And the only person in the household who was praying was my father, right? So it's my father, it's time for him to pray. He go in the room, everybody got to be quiet. And, I remember him just bowing down, him prostrating, et cetera, et cetera. And at that time, for much of his life, he actually was praying in English, right? And so, and it was really difficult for him to overcome his, I guess you would say, well, not necessarily overcome his love. I don't think that that's really a good way to express it. But my father was like a true believer in Elijah. He was one of those people that he was like, he treated him as if he was like a Rasulullah, right? And so I remember having a conversation with him about Imam W.D. Muhammad. And so he said to me that one thing that never really could wrap my head around with Imam W.D. Muhammad is that, he was so critical of his father. He should have known that we would have followed him anyway. That's what my father said to me. Is because he was really hurt that Imam W.D. Muhammad was critical of his father, right? Just let you know where his heart was really, but over time, my father, he learned enough Arabic until eventually he started to pray in Arabic as well. And he started to call the adhan. And as a matter of fact, he used to frequent Masjid al-Mujahideen and up on 60th Street after a certain amount of time. He would originally go to Siskar Muhammad, which is like his home for him. But he would spend a lot of time as well as Masjid al-Mujahideen with Imam Asim and the other crew up there, So in some ways, that is like, it's somewhat like a home masjid for me too, like Masjid Mujahideen, Quba, Sister Clara Muhammad, all three of those, but mainly, but spent more time between Masjid Mujahideen and the Quba Institute as I was coming up, and so I know all the really key people, in those two places.
So if you look at your growing up, so this is your teenage years, right? Which really kind of is like influential years for a person, especially becoming up in Philadelphia. So before you left, was there a big Salafi influence in Philadelphia, or was mostly just, African Americans doing their Islam the way they understood it? Like, so because you have Quba School and 60th Street and Sister Claire Mama, these are all different approaches to practicing Islam. And I'm not talking about necessarily in theology. I'm just talking about approach, right?
Right.
So you're going to three, Masjid Mujahideen, right? Basically from the Dar Islam type of understanding, Jama'at, Jama'at, community, Amir, Anwar at that time, Sheikh Anwar and them. I don't know, were there still sort of Saudi influence, or he had already changed by your time?
No, he didn't. I wouldn't characterize this Saudi influence at all. I mean, there was somewhat of a. I'm trying to use a kind word, but basically, if they had a bad experience in Saudi Arabia,
right,
from the Saudis, coming up, being there poor with their whole family, and they had to fight quite a bit when they were there, physically fight with Arabs, so their attitude about Saudi was somewhat negative, I would say. And but of course their studies, that's where the bulk of their studies were, so of course there was a genuine love, of course, for Medina and Mecca and the people, certain people that they knew there and their mashayikh. But I wouldn't. Shaykh Anwar has always been somewhat. He was never Salafi, put it like that. He was never Salafi. If any, he was attacked for not being, for not embracing, right? The Salafism of, like, of course, the brothers from Northeast Orange and things like that. So he was constantly attacked, and we have to defend him from time to time. We go, go to certain people's talks. They come to the city. And sometimes I remember challenging a couple of those brothers, like personally. Some of those imams there who were leading the charge with all of the cancel culture back then.
But at that time, what I mean by that, because I remember Shaykh Anwar, I have like several memories of him. I remember him the early 80s when they were still living overseas. They used to come back, and him and Anas, they were younger then. Yeah. And they would do, Tarawih at Masjid, Philadelphia Masjid.
Right, yeah. Clark Muhammad.
I do remember him when he first came back, and that would have had to have been in the early 90s, well, mid 90s, 93, 92, somewhere around 93. And at that time, he was still, more or less like from his Medina studies type of, and now I know him totally different in another whole. So there was somewhere, that's what I'm asking. When, were you in with the outward switch, or at the beginning? And you understand what I mean?
Well, yeah, no, I came somewhat late in the late 80s, because like we moved from Chicago back to Philadelphia in 84. Right? So I didn't meet him until maybe 3-4 years later, right? And I started to visit the masjid. As a matter of fact, Sheikh Nafi, his father, Allah yarhamu, he actually was one of my first teachers there as well.
Oh, so that's early, yeah, okay.
So I used to spend time with him in the office, and and sometimes up in the prayer room. So I came like around that time, So I was more with them in the early 90s and in the late 80s.
And with Sister Clara Muhammad. So was that the dominant picture of Philadelphia? Like, because they is totally different. So in those days, that was basically the.
They're right, exactly. They were, yeah.
It hadn't become influenced a lot by different ideas. It was basically Philadelphia as African American community with African American thought.
Right, exactly, yeah. And I would add to that. You would have, for instance, you would have the Kuba, you had the Philadelphia Masjid, which was called Clara Muhammad, and they would go back and forth about Philadelphia Masjid, was Clara Muhammad. Then in Masjid Mujahideen was another different paradigm. Right. Then you had the Muslims of America on 52nd Street, who was sort of right, the followers of Abdul Qadir Jilani. And then you have like the Baal Muhayyideen brand as well, right? And then you have Masjid Allah, right, which is similar to the Philadelphia Masjid or Clara Muhammad, but a little bit different in certain approaches, But I would say that would be sort of like the nuclei of the,
So when you observe that, looking back, because you look at now today, and you look at the Muslim community in Philadelphia at that period, from all ends, just your view. How would you evaluate the then and the now, the positives and the, let's say, not so positives? Let's not say negative. Just if you look at both, you look at this environment, right? And you say, okay, let me see what this looks like. Reflecting back, how would you look at that? If you could pick 3 points that you would highlight as positive developments, and 3 things that we're still challenged with that were not so positive. What would those 3 on each side be? So there's 6 altogether.
Yeah, well, I got 2 right off the top, but one is back in those years, it seemed like the quality of Muslim was different, and I should say somewhat better, because not to cast aspersions on people today, but there was a smaller community, right? And when something happened in the city to any Muslim, within 10 minutes, everybody in the city knew what happened. They knew who this person was. And it was like almost everybody in the city knew who everyone was, right? So that was one thing that I would say was a positive part of it. And maybe a point 2, which is to sort of camelbacks off of that, is that there was much more focus on the basics, but focus on brotherhood. There wasn't as much. There was friction, and certain people didn't like one another, but it wasn't as bad as it became later on, where it was a lot more disunity. See, but one thing that's always been a problem with Philly has been the ability to differ without sort of like just breaking off ties with one another, completely separating, or even becoming violent, right? That's always been one of those problems in Philadelphia, right? Even though we call it the city of brotherly love, but it's for example, when I came back from overseas, well, politely, if I start before I went overseas, there was a merger between UMM and Quba Institute. And this is with Luqman Abdul Haq, McKinney Gamble, was the emir down at the United Muslim Masjid. And so there was a merger that happened. I went overseas, but prior to going overseas, about a week before I left, brothers down at UMM, they came to me and they said, that we've watched you grow, we've listened to you talk, and we really like you a lot. We want to give you some type of support, right? When you go overseas, So they sort of gave me a scholarship, so I can actually, live in my own apartment when I was there. Because my original plan was, I'm going to go and live with the students in their dorms, and in the summers I'm going to come home and I'm going to work my security job, because I asked my supervisor before I left, is it, if I leave and come back in the summer, would it be okay to come back to work? He said, yeah, of course, no problem. So I'm going to save up money enough to last me, when I go back, hopefully. So that was my original plan. But when they came to me, that actually made it easy for me to live a bit more comfortably when I came there. It was, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it was enough, right, for me, right? So, but before I came back, like 1 year, towards the end of my 4th year in the university, and I wanted to stay for an additional 2 years, they broke up. Something happened that led them to break up, split apart, and they automatically lumped me with Cuba and said, hey, well, we're going to cut off your stipend, and so this is your final year. So I was forced to come back home because I didn't have any that extra support, because I wanted to stay there for at least 2 more years. But when I came home, I actually tried to work with everybody. I tried to work with the brothers at UMM. I tried to work with the brothers at Cuba. But certain people, at Cuba didn't want me to work with the brothers at UMM. Certain people at UMM didn't want me to work with the brothers at Cuba. And I'm just like, man, why can't we just try to do something? Let's be unified in some way. You see, And I had people tell me, like one brother tell me that, well, you should open your own masjid. And I was like, no, that's what everybody does. Everybody does that, and they just get frustrated and they start their own masjid. But we need to try to work with what we already got and try to bring some unity. Even started teaching classes, and it was not a very large response with regard to classes. But then eventually what happens was, I got the job in the prison, and that became my bread and butter. And then, I did some work on the side, of course, for the community. And then I got the invitation to come out here. But anyway, the point I'm making is that of course there are a lot of things that led to the fractured state of the city and the leadership, which of course trickles down to everyone else. You know, but that's always been a challenge, right? And this is even before the appearance of the Selfies, right? You know, there were people already at one another's throats. It got worse once the Salafi influence had entered into the community.
Now, let me ask you. So, what was your experience like as a chaplain in Islam in the prison?
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like? Because so you're out in the community, you have one experience, so you got a job, and that becomes sort of, the prison becomes a community for you. Even though as
Right.
a chaplain, that could be, you know, challenging, but that essentially becomes your community.
Yeah,
So
right.
What's that like?
Oh, that was pretty. I guess you say it was fun for for a certain number of years, especially at the beginning. You know, I came into an institution where probably about 85% of the brothers inside the prison would identify as being Salafi. And the other 15% was, you know, maybe brothers who don't identify with anything. There might be some Shiites, there may be some Hanafis, some Shafi'is, Asha'ira, right, in there, you know. But the vast majority of the brothers, even though many of them didn't even know what it meant to be Salafi, right, you know, but they were told you have to be Salafi. But they identified that way, which made it a challenge from the very beginning, because I didn't hide that I wasn't Salafi. And so people would send material into them about me. And so when the very first public meetings I had, I said to the brothers, I said, listen, you know, I'm here to answer your questions, to ask whatever you want, you know. So, and I knew they were already saying, he said the Quran is created, you know, so let's have that conversation. I said, okay. I said, you know,
wait a minute, where'd that one come from?
I don't know. Somebody threw it in there, you know, that, you know, he said, Ash'ari, they say the Quran is created. So I said, okay, well, first of all, I don't believe that. And second of all, even if I did say it and anything, tell me what would be the problem with that. And of course, nobody can tell you why that might even be a problem, you know, if you actually believe that it's something wrong, you know. So you see that just blind following that was there. But what happened was that, okay, so it started off a little bit bumpy, and after a while, they came to realize that I wasn't there really to try to make life hard for them. You know, I was like, I was approachable. Right? You know, I leave my door open. Hey, you want to come to the office? Oh, you want to debate? Let's do it. Bismillah. Right? You know, let the brothers come down to my office if they want to debate. And they would check out books from my library. But they knew after a certain amount of time that if they really needed something administratively, that I wasn't going to hold it against them, the fact that I knew that they didn't like me, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So what they would say, I would hear rumors, because the brothers would hear things on the block, and they'd come and tell me about, and they said, well, so-and-so says that, you know, yeah, his aqeedah is jacked up, but he's a good brother. And I'm just like, okay, no problem. That's good enough for me, as long as I'm a good brother, right? You know what I mean? So a few times I would get up on the minbar, and I would so get a little bit frustrated with them, you know, and tell the brothers that, I said, listen, man, y'all, because what would happen would be they wouldn't really frustrate me per se. They would frustrate the other brothers who liked me, and they didn't want those guys liking me. And so sometimes brothers would come to me, and they would be, you know, like on the verge of, I wouldn't say tears, but on the verge of actually physically doing something to somebody. And they said, listen, man, I get tired of them talking about you on the block, so on, so on. You know, so I would have to say something in the khutbah. And so on a couple of different occasions, I'd get on the minbar, and I would say to them things like, well, I say, well, if my aqidah is jacked up, you know, at least my aqidah kept me out of prison, right? You know, I shouldn't say that, but like that's
a low blow.
You know, so you know, but at any rate, you know, it was, like I said, it was fun for most of it was 5 years only, you know, but during the time of there, I struck a balance with the brothers. You know, we came to I guess you would say an understanding, right? That it just became an issue of, like, we say, okay, he's a good brother, you know, his aqidah is wrong, but he's a good brother. I say, okay, whatever. I say your aqidah is wrong, you know, but I'm okay as long as you say I'm a good brother. That's all that matters. But towards the end, unfortunately, what happened was that once I actually got somewhat of a handle on the community and helped them to start to harmonize a bit, and I would try to bring people in to actually talk to the brothers, you know, because I say it's not only, I'm just one person, you know, I should bring in visitors. So, but the administrators started to put roadblocks up. They would tell me that so-and-so can't come in, he can't come in, he can't come in, including like Imam Mujahid Abdul Salam. You know him. So I mean, he was one of the people I would try to. He came in a couple of times, but then after that, they said he can't come in anymore. And so I started to have more fights with the administration than I actually had with the brothers, right? You know, so at that point I realized that there wasn't really much more I can do to sort of grow the community, right, beyond what I had done. And actually, at the time, the Imam they invited me to Zaytun, I was already looking for another job, right? Believe it or not, you know. So it just so happened like that sort of landed in my lap, and I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. And so I came to California after that.
Out in Zaytuna, you've been out there for many years now. What is the experience from Islam on the West Coast as opposed to Islam in the East Coast? What is the experience between the two environments? What is the difference?
Yeah, there's some similarities in certain regards, you know, but they're also you can find an opposite extreme, you know, amongst many people. I mean, there's a lot of diversity, just like on the East Coast, but I like to say like the East Coast is somewhat like Baghdad, right? You know, in the past, right? Old Baghdad, where you have all of the firaq and nihal right there in Baghdad, and they're debating. Everybody has to be, you got to be strapped with your dalil, you know what I mean? Because you're going to get into a debate up the street, right? You know, so like, and I actually like that to an extent, you know, about the East Coast, you know, that people, you know, they challenge you, right? You know, you have in certain places you have the opposite extreme here, where you have some people who don't really care anything about, you know, well, I won't say anything, but it's like their sense of Sharia is you know it's a little bit lax, you know. They don't really see it as important. And it's not all of the people. It's not even the majority of them, but there is a significant number of people in that particular regard who have somewhat this attitude that you don't have the right to judge them, right? You know, and not that you're judging them, but it's like you're just using Allah's criteria for judgment. You know, so I'm not judging you. I'm just looking at you through the lens that my Creator tells me to look at you through. You know, so you have, of course, you know, people doing things that you know, which if they would be challenged or pushed up against, you know, if you put pressure on them there, then they would just say, okay, you just mind your own business. You know, that's not what we do. Well, on the West Coast, I would say that because, well, in particular in the Bay Area, you're talking about an area where a lot of the Muslims are very wealthy. A lot of them are very wealthy, and California is one of the wealthiest places on the planet, especially in the Bay Area. Because we got YouTube here, Facebook is here. Google, I think, where's Google? Google here? I can't remember. Google's here too, right? So we have like the tech giants that are here.
Google's out there.
What's that?
I said Google's out there.
Yeah. So you have like these tech giants.
Cali sometimes, so I remember.
Right. Yeah. So you got a lot of wealthy Muslims, doctors, engineers, et cetera, and people don't live as close to one another as they do on the East Coast. You know, it's not like Brooklyn. It's not like, you know, Philly. But you always have to drive, go on the freeway almost every time you go out on your car. Sometimes you get in your car, you always have to drive to get somewhere. And so people come together at banquets, at, you know, fundraisers, unless you just have some special friend actually that you can kind of sort of get, you know, spend some time with and learn together. But it's, you know, I don't want to be too harsh, you know, against the Bay Area people either, but I do remember I gave a khutbah some years ago called I think it was called Sufis, Selfies, and the Masjid. And the reason I had to give that khutbah was that I detected a similar type of mentality amongst certain Sufis out here, as you would find among the Selfies on the East Coast. Right. So if the Salafis are saying, okay, the Mawlid is bid'ah, you can't celebrate it, you know, then you got the Sufis, they're like, you know, you have to celebrate the Mawlid. If you don't celebrate the Mawlid, then you don't really love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know. So, and I just felt there was just two extremes. I'm just like, well, listen, okay, you know, I'm not going to say that the Salafis don't love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam simply because they don't embrace the Mawlid. If anything, that could be an expression of love too. You know, I feel like they're protecting the Sunnah from corruption, you know, but I'm not saying that you don't love the Prophet either, you know. So, but but you again, there's certain people who, when I came here, they were labeled by some of the locals as the West Coast Wahhabis, right? So, so there's some people out here who were labeled by some of the locals as the West Coast Wahhabis, right? That was because of how strict they were with regard to their adherence to certain madhab, right? So, yeah.
Oh, you mean the people following madhabs?
Not all of them, but some of them, right?
I mean, no, I'm talking about that's what they wasn't talking about a person who was necessarily in Aqidah Wahhabi.
Right. No.
Practice you're talking
about the practice, right? Some of the temperament practice, things like that. Yeah.
Now here comes some of the questions. I know you gotta go, so it's like I'm trying to.
No, I have about 20 minutes, you know. So
okay. I'll give you one. This is from your Philly people. Imam Malik. He says for Shaykh Abdullah, what are your thoughts on the necessity of tasawwuf for us in the Black Muslim community?
I think it's well, again, it all depends on what we mean by tasawwuf, right? Naturally, and that's, we know that tasawwuf, it's, some people is what we call goofy Sufism. Goofy Sufism, you know, and where it's like people sort of treat it as like just a different form of spirituality, about feeling good, never challenging yourself, you know, lighting incense and meditating, things like that. And there's some non-Muslims who think they're Sufis, unfortunately, in that particular regard. But you know, the practical Sufism, whereas, you know, again, you're resisting, you try not to be jealous of others, you try not to be arrogant, and so you try not to succumb to your anger and your. So to me, this is not only a necessity for Black people, but a necessity for all people, right? You know, and of course all Muslims first and foremost, but then everyone else, right? And I think that this is one of the major problems with everyone, realistically, nowadays, because we so easily, I guess you would say, triggered. That's an important term. We're easily triggered by things, you know, and we don't do as the Prophet ﷺ advised the man who came to him when he said, "Give me some advice," and he said, "Talk about, you know, don't become angry, meaning don't act on your anger." And because, of course, everyone becomes angry. That's part of our nature. We can't avoid it. But we don't act on our anger. Sometimes it's fear. We're appealed to through our fears, appealed to through our desires. And those are all trying to master, you know, your fear, your desire, your anger. All of that is parts of what we call practical Sufism. And if you don't like the word Sufism, okay, just don't use the word Sufism, you know. But, you know, you do have to get a handle on those things, because these are things that originate from the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and from Allah, more importantly, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I just, the thing that sometimes baffles me is that I find a lot of people, friends even, who are parts of tariqah that have sheikh and things like that, who seem at times to be the most or the least, I can say, the least disciplined when it comes to matters that enrage them, right? So, I mean, you know, of course, we know, people know my MO, right? Is, you know, I share things that people don't like, right? You know, and so what happens is that, you know, I find this reaction where people, they shut down, where it's like, okay, listen, I listen. I'm not telling you to like the person. I'm just telling you to listen, you know, asking you to give consideration to what they're saying, and if it makes sense, right? Does it conform with what reality is? That's all I'm saying. You know, I understand that the vessel is not a perfect vessel, right? It's polluted, right? You know, but sometimes the only vessels that exist that are actually giving us certain ideas are the polluted vessels, right? You know, and so sometimes, you know, the way that people react, you know, to me is like, you know, it's like, oh, okay. And I'm saying, I thought you were Sufi, right? I thought you were trying to follow the path, right? But it's just unfortunate that I see that, you know. But just in short, you know, with regard to the question, I think is 100% necessary that we internalize our fiqh, you know, that we, you know, the fiqh of the heart, you know, that we have to really work hard on that, because it is the source of our salvation or our damnation. and that's the heart.
There's another question. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Abdullah. You mentioned reading and how finding out most people don't read was a major blow to you. Can you speak on the importance of reading and why Muslims especially should learn the habit of reading in general? And what are some English books you would recommend to adults and younger kids growing up? I'll leave the question in case you...
Okay, Zakir Islam. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Speak to the importance of reading. I mean, our deen, the very first thing revealed to the Prophet was Iqra. We know that. And of course, for the Prophet, ﷺ, he was not reading a book, but so in one sense, you can understand the verse or the word itself to either mean read Allah's signs, right, or to recite, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, recite in the name of your Lord who created, right? And the Prophet told us, talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim, that the seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. And then we know the story of Badr, when the Prophet ﷺ, he promised these people, if any of them would teach 10 of the Sahaba how to read, then they could win their, they can be redeemed, they get their freedom, right? And so the Prophet himself, being one who actually could not read himself, he actually emphasized the importance of reading. But the type of reading we need is not simply to be able to read words and pronounce letters, right? Phonetics. That's not really the type of reading we need. We need critical readers. We need readers who are able to ask the right questions when they read a book, when someone makes a claim, is this fact or opinion, right? And how can you distinguish that? What was the basis of their argument? What's evidence that they produced? Is there evidence something that is we can contest the evidence, right? And you understand. So those are the type of questions that are important for any type of reading of any type of book. As for, again, suggestions for reading, I mean, it's give me some time to think about it. Hopefully I can come up with some recommendations before this is over. And I guess I would just say that it all depends on what your interest is. And if you mention certain topics, then perhaps I can recommend certain books to you that probably will make it easier.
Well, here comes a kind of
curveball.
Here it comes.
Yeah.
It's prefaced with some love.
Yeah.
Here comes Allah, OG. You made it up. You've risen. You're an OG now. Right? Do you feel that there is a huge barrier between white imams and foreign imams at these big conferences, undermining the Black Muslim communities as a whole within these conferences by keeping the talks of Blacks of Islam out of the equation?
Well, I think it's not necessarily intentional, right? That people will exclude certain topics, right? Because you have to always look at who's running the show. Who's running the show? Who's in charge of this particular convention and this particular convention? And what we find is that most of the time, if not all of the time, is an ethnic majority that dominates in the boards of certain organizations. So the concerns, the ambitions, the desires, the fears, all of those things they're going to be connected to that particular ethnic group, right? Right. So for them, talks about Blackness in Islam or Black Muslims and their role in the community and the ummah is probably not going to take priority, right? In the same way, I don't think that if we had a Black sort of organized program, that we would be going to spend a whole lot of time focusing on what people, the Egyptians or the Yemeni people or Syrian people, what their concerns are. Because we have our primary concerns too. Of course, it could be malicious at times, but I'm not totally convinced that it's really malicious. What I do think is that too many of us spend too much time worrying about what other groups of people are doing with respect to us and our play. We don't spend enough time focusing on what we should be doing with respect to our play. I do think that there's a heavy focus on, I guess you'd say, victimhood. We have a very strong sort of victimhood culture right now, and everything that's happening hasn't helped, either with politics, et cetera, you know. But when we look at our great leaders, our great intellectuals in the Black community, Carter G. Woodson, Harold Cruz, or you're talking about, you know, Malcolm, Martin, whatever these people are, Frederick Douglass, Delaney, that when we reflect upon these people and these men, the attitude of our predecessors was like, listen, you know, yeah, there are obstacles, you know, but we're going to overcome them, right? And we're going to make good regardless, right? And it wasn't so much a focus on trying to get people to like you or to stop calling you the N-word or whatever language that is in, you see. And I do think that in itself is a big problem for us, that we're so emotional that we don't allow for the opportunity to actually build something of our own, right? You know, and because we're so emotional, all of our concerns can always easily be assuaged by somebody just talking to us in a nice way. You know, as I said, I like you, yeah, Black Lives Matter, yes. And, oh, that's all we want you to do. We want you to acknowledge Black Lives Matter, right? You know, but prior to the elections, what were we talking about? People were talking about reparations, you know, but where's that conversation now? You know, it's gone, you know. And the reason it's gone because, in my view, because not enough Black people who actually were claiming that we deserve reparations have been in the faces and in the ears of the politicians who claimed that they were in favor of it, right, actually to make it come about, which proves that the Black community itself is not serious even about something they claim that they're serious about, right? You know, so because if they were serious about it, then they would be, you know, right now, you know, with, you know, Democrats, majority in the Congress, you know, it's a slight majority because of the vice president's vote, you know, and then you have, of course, in the White House, why are there not Black people like doing more for themselves? See, why they're pushing that, you know? But for me, I feel like, okay, whether or not you get reparations, we need to be doing things to help ourselves, help our own to do better, right? You know, so people are not going to like you. Some people are going to like you, and it shouldn't really matter so much. It shouldn't matter so much. What should matter is that, listen, if I can get someone to help me do or accomplish my goals, it shouldn't even matter at the end of the day whether or not they like you. Who cares? And at the end of the day, because I asked them to help me, they gave me the help I needed. I'm keeping moving. But I think where it's just too much emotional stuff happening with too many of our people to actually make any type of effort that we're involved in to actually, you know, bring forth any real fruit that's actually going to have long-term effects on our situations.
So I got a follow-up question, because I think like this. I don't know if you think like I think. Some areas we do, but my thing is, and that's how I feel, and I don't care what no one else thinks about. It's my personal feeling, right? I'm gonna do a little bit. Line. Say it for me.
Better watch it.
Hey, bro, I go hard. You know that, right? I can't handle it. So listen, what I mean though, seriously, the thought. Let me get this out of the way. You're blocking my thoughts, right? We were together and we worked separately on doing our conferences that were focusing on African-American issues. We started working together with the African-American Islamic Summit. You went on with the Black American Conference, right? So we have experience. We actually did this.
Right.
This is about you, not about me later, right?
Yeah.
Right? No, but here's the point.
Yeah.
Why? What made you get involved in it at all? And what was your result? So 2 questions. So from your side.
Right, yeah.
Why did you get involved, period? Right. What is it says? I need to do this. Lamppost education, if it's going to work, Masjid Muhammad, we're going to do this. Why? Right. What was the reason? And what was your result? Right.
Well, it were two things I would say that were the reasons behind it. Number one had a lot to do with the fact that I felt that there was a need for our community to have its own independence, right? You know, with regard to trying to form a national vision, I guess you say, for the ummah, right? And of course that is connected with a certain amount of discontent related to other organizations. Like Kareem, like he points out, is that that those particular organizations, that's our issues are not their focus, right? And for me, I don't blame them for not having us at the center of their focus, right? Because hey, they built what they built. That's their thing, right? And I'm not going to go there and demand that they let me take it over and take it in my direction when they've sweated so much and they've probably bled in order to get what they have today, right? So that was part of it in particular, is that wanted to sort of maintain that unique vision, right, for our community, because we do have our own unique contributions, right? And our anxieties are not the same as the anxieties of the immigrant, quote unquote, immigrants, right? But the other reason was, well, and it probably is just simply a B, like 1A, 1B, right? Which is that I wanted to be able to show our community and their communities as well that it's possible for people to come together with different ideas and different opinions about things, right? And they can sit down and have a civil conversation, walk off the stage, and don't have any desire to hurt one another, right? Yeah, you see, and so that was the goal, right? And so our very first conference was, I think it really helped. It was really nice, and everybody was happy, and very memorable program. But the following two, the next one was on site in Atlanta, and then we had the last one, which was online. So with regard to the question, like, what did I get out of it, and what, to an extent, it seems that that I really didn't get much out of it, right? I'll put it like this: with respect to certain members, people who are actually participants in the program, it seemed like I didn't really get much out of it or achieve much of that particular goal that I had in mind, because you had either people who refused to show up because they didn't agree with me philosophically, and to me, that's the point, right? You don't agree with me philosophically, that's why you need to come, right? Come and sit down, let's have a conversation, But those people that say, no, either my way or the highway, Then you had other people who just were turned off, okay, by perhaps me or certain things that they saw me sharing, like publicly, or ideas or opinions that I had that they believe were anathema to black mainstream black ideology or our culture, right? So for them, and they say, okay, well, no, we're not going to work with him. As a matter of fact, we're not going to invite him. We're going to cancel him, and we're going to start our own thing, right? And ultimately, what happens is that the community, especially the youth, they lose out when that occurs. You see, so that's what I've gotten out of it. Which is, I guess you say, I got some sense of satisfaction out of what I did put into it. Because those who did show up, alhamdulillah, they contributed, and they contributed well. And for those who were willing to observe and listen and watch, they learned something, But there are a lot of other people who sort of broke away and said, well, you know what, we don't like, his opinions. We think that, he shouldn't have them, and we don't think he has a right to even have them. So we're not going to work with him anymore.
And we got 5 minutes, so I mean,
yeah, I think 10 minutes, okay.
Question. Now I'm going to ask you, because you have experience. Experience is your best teacher, right? And there's always, while you're alive, a chance to renew your effort. After examining your life and examining everything and examining the different movements, and there's so many things we didn't get to talk about. Time is limited, so I hope we would have another opportunity to expand, right? What will you say the condition of Muslims in the West in general is? The state of Muslim America, so let's say that. Muslim America in general, and inside that, the state of Black American Muslims.
Mm.
If you could summarize what is the state of American Muslims in general, in America, Islam in America, and then in particular, Black American, African American Muslims.
Right.
From your view.
Well, of course, I mean, any generalization I make is going to be an overgeneralization, but I just want people to understand that saying this is not meant to say that there are not some good happening in the community nationally. But overall, I would say that the community is in bad shape. The national community is in very bad shape with respect to our iman or aqidah, the sort of commitment or even I can say our conviction about the truth of Islam, right? Because you see some of these polls that have been taken, like from Pew, and they talk about the number of Muslims or no longer Muslims or not frequenting the Masjid, or they leave Islam. They see like a rise. And we also have, of course, a lot of people entering Islam at the same time. But the community has become too obsessed with politics at this point. And that's after a time when we were somewhat apolitical, right? Largely apolitical. And we know our imams of old telling us that, voting is haram, you can't run for office, this is you're in the belly of the Taghut, all those type of things, But now we've turned things around, and now instead of leading, we're following others, in our attempts to form sort of alliances which we think are beneficial. So nationally, I see that as a big problem, in itself, and it also as a political problem. It starts with politics, but it's trickled down into morality. So our sense of morality and conviction about the truth of Islam has now been really polluted, right, on a national level. With respect to the Black community, and I think I've said this before, but unless something happens with this new young generation, personally, and again, it's a grim picture, right? Hopefully I'm wrong. Personally, I can't see a future for Islam in the Black community, right, come a couple generations from now, after we all die off, if we continue upon the trajectory we're on right now. And of course, I say that because even when the masajid were open, most of the people who attended the masajid were either senior citizens or people like our age, So sometimes there've been some in the 30s as well, right? You don't see many young people in the masjid to begin with. And I'm talking about teens and those in their 20s. Imam Amin Muhammad, his funeral, that all the pictures that people were posting online, almost all those pictures had pictures of senior citizens. These are the people who came to his janazah, right? You didn't see that many young people in those pictures, right? Not saying that they weren't there, they probably were, but most of the pictures I saw, they were also senior citizens, right? And then add on top of that, because of the fact that right now it seems that Blackness has become more important to so many of us than Islam itself, or what we do is we're trying to validate our cultural ideas about Blackness and race through an Islamic lens. That there's the fear that that our children are not really going to know much more about Islam. They're going to know more about BLM than they're going to know about the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, right? So for me, of course, it's a grim picture. I hope I'm wrong about that, right? But I'm not seeing a whole lot of positive things. In other words, what I'm saying is that our worst enemies are ourselves. Our worst enemies are ourselves, and we can sit back and we can blame white people, we can blame the immigrants, we can blame everybody else, right? If we want to, we can blame it even on institutional racism, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, we have will, we have volition, we have opportunity before us to do better, right? And nobody's stopping us from doing better and taking advantage of opportunities that are available for us. And as long as we continue to see ourselves as victims as opposed to survivors, then I think that there's not really a whole lot of hope that that the situation is going to get any better. Because we're going to be easily manipulated by people because we are so emotional, right? When anything comes up and they told us that this was based upon, this person's racist, that person's racist, this is racist, that's racist, that person's Salah, he's Uncle Tom, all this stuff that goes on around, it doesn't help the children. It doesn't give them any clarity about what Islam truly is. It doesn't give any clarity about what the Prophet ﷺ, he actually represented, et cetera, et cetera. So sorry for the long answer. But.
Now, following that, let's reverse that trend. Because here's what I look at. And I say this. We have problems. You know me well. One of my biggest problems, I think, in Islam and the black community is Wahhabism. That's my opinion. Someone may disagree, fine with that. That's my opinion, and I'm sticking with it. Right? Listen. So what I do to reverse that trend is try to teach, to the best of my ability, Sunni Islam. That's what I do. I spend my life doing it. Regardless of those who may disagree with me, who may think I'm whatever, it doesn't matter. This is my concentration. And, I'm very verbal about it. It's well known about me, right? So that's my way of reversing the trend that I see. If we keep going down this way, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
What would be the reversal of the trend if you had the ability, or, in an ideal world, which we don't live in, but what would you do to change that if you could?
Well, you have to focus on the young people. I mean, that's the main thing. We have to put our eyes on the young people. I mean, it's one of those, this famous statement made by, was it Frederick Douglass, where he talked about how it's, of course, I'm paraphrasing him, but he talked about how it's easier to teach a young person than it is it's easier to build a young person than to repair a broken older person. Of course, he said it more eloquently than that. I'm quite sure somebody is probably going to add it to the chat. But I think that we have to we're kidding ourselves if we think that we're going to be the main foot soldiers, right? In our attempts to actually improve our condition. Right, the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba, many of these Sahaba, they were young people. They were young people. Some of them teenagers, some of them in their 20s, right? And some of us are like 60, 70 years old, and we're talking about, we started some new effort and things like that. And I was like, okay, we have tried that, done it how many times? How much support are you getting? Are you actually appealing to those who represent the future, right? So to me, the reverse would be, or in order to reverse it, you would have to start with the youth and try to figure out what is it that really moves them about Islam, and of course I agree with you to an extent about the importance of Aqidah, having sound Aqidah, right? And that in itself could be something that will sort of be a sort of a rallying call for young people as well, because young people like to feel like a family or like a gang or things like that anyway. And I think that this is one of the appeals why Salafism has such an appeal to a lot of people as well. You're talking about people coming from, many of them, not all of them, but many of them coming from broken homes, not knowing what family feels like, they're part of something. Everybody's dressing the same, everybody's talking the same, everybody's listening to the same people, everybody's reading the same books. At a certain age, we have hunger for that, and maybe that would be the way to sort of bring them in, and then, okay, well, then we got to say, we got Aqidah straight, we got our Salah straight, but now, there's this other stuff we got to do too. Life skills, we got to talk about, other education and how to secure your future, create a career for yourself or a job, et cetera, how to start a family, right? You understand? So it can't just stay on Aqidah, but it definitely, that's the starting point of all of those things. So I don't see them as really mutually exclusive. I agree with you, but it's not, but I think it's that plus a lot more than that.
I know you got to go, but this is one question.
Yeah, let's put
that. Right? Is this in order, this is, and they don't know this, but we talked about this. I think it's important, and I got to work on it. My brother says something to me all the time. I don't know if I should give him this kind of credit, but I'm going to go ahead and let it out there. He says, you have to start listening for the sake of understanding, not for the sake of refutation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Don't say yes, exactly. He's going to think you got one. You're supposed to be on my side. No, but he says this to me all the time. So to do that takes patience. You can, you got to wait. So you owe me another one because you gotta have a chance to do some reputation, dog.
Sure.
Yeah, listen though, because when I think of Wahhabism and Ahl Sunnah, meaning in fiqh, into aqidah, and tasawwuf, I'm just talking about the same way you're talking, so we can have one sound thing to agree on.
Right.
I think within the traditional understanding of Ahl Sunnah, we got plenty of room for differences.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's wide. I mean, it's enough for you without contradicting that whole system.
Right.
So that's my issue. I mean, Aqidah is what we're fighting against all the time because where I live. If I lived maybe somewhere else, that wouldn't be the issue. It might be just learning, understanding proper rules of fiqh and moving. It may be just spiritual. It's just where I live. It's, as they say, Aqidah wars. I just live in that environment.
Hey, you're in Baghdad.
Yeah, right. Hey, man, they rap. I'll give you a story. I was in Yemen, right? In Hadramaut. And we went to visit one of the great scholars there, Habib Aydrus bin Umar al-Habashi, the Musnad of Hadramaut, rahimahullah ta'ala. And so we're standing in front of his maqam, and like ISIS type Al-Qaeda come on a van with rifles. I'm looking at this stuff like, what the heck am I doing? And I said, this is the environment.
Yeah.
Right? So you have these extremes. You can't make noise. What you're fighting with, right?
Yeah. Right.
Kill you.
Yeah.
Different environment. Right? So what I mean by that, so you got these different environments.
Yeah.
What made you, and this is, we don't have time, but this is what made you in Aqidah, in your fiqh, because you are a Maliki in fiqh, right?
Right.
And you follow the practice of tasawwuf. And I'm not talking about tariqah, I'm talking about ilm tasawwuf as a fan, as a science, right? Why did you choose that and not the Salafi Wahhabi approach? Why?
I think that it's partially because of my temperament, and then partially because of my experience growing up. In other words, what I mean by that is, like I said, my family, my mother and father didn't put a lot of pressure on us to do anything specific when it came to Islam. My father prayed. I didn't, my mother really didn't see her doing that. No, but my father was the only one in the house praying, and so we were sort of like left to sort of to be truth seekers, right? So that in itself, I felt like it makes it difficult for me to become what we call hizbi, right, or muta'assib, right? And any time that I felt that someone was trying to make me become that way, that my nature didn't allow for me to do so, right? I mean, I had a time in my past I was attracted to Salafism, right? I was attracted to it, but then like again, I started seeing these things and said, "Oh no, I don't want to be associated with that," right? I was attracted to, even like a lot of my friends, they were taking on mashayikh, joining tariqah, right, and I'm not saying I'm not averse to it in the sense that if once somebody feels they need a sheikh, murid, sheikh murid relations, go right ahead. But I saw a lot of negative things happen too, right? That led me to feel, okay, you know what? That's not really what I want to do, at least not with those persons. I haven't met the person that I think can actually give me this sort of direction or that I think is necessary if needed. You know, add on top of the fact that I feel that I'm able to internalize the sunnah. You know, of course, some people will hear that and say, "Oh, he doesn't need a sheikh because someone said that, you know, whoever doesn't have a sheikh, shaitan is the sheikh." And I said, well, I just say, well, that's not a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So, and at any rate, so I think that, again, temperament, experience on top of that had something to do with it. The way I was raised, you know, and then studying usul al-fiqh. I think that really put the icing on the cake, right? You know, when I was overseas and I discovered usul al-fiqh, and I said, man, you know, my people, they need this, right? You know, they need this. You know, qat'i dhanni, you know, the difference between the two. What is, you know, this is explicit, this is probabilistic. You know, there's non-negotiables, there are negotiables. You know, studying those things and understanding how to prioritize interests, right? The maqasid, etc. So I'd say that that's really what did it for me, and because of that, of course, you know, I haven't been able to fit in a lot of different camps, right? You know, because the people who are members of the camp, they oftentimes they want full surrender, right? You know, of you to the ideology, because I never really completely, you know, given in, then it's like, okay, well, he's not really one of us, right? You know, so I know what it feels like to get the cold shoulder, right? You understand, you know, which only sort of makes me much, I guess you say, free or independent, right? In the way that I try to approach things. You know, I mean, being part of a team is a good thing. You know, I mean, I think that a lot of people need that. They need to, you know, the camaraderie. They need to feel what it's like to be family, to be part of a team. You know, especially if you never played sports and stuff like that before. You know, but I just feel that those are the things that contributed to me not becoming, you know, a Salafi or going to an extreme in it. And actually, what happened was when I went overseas, that first year, I actually took a time to somewhat like purge myself of even a lot of the resentment and anger I actually entertained towards Salafism. You know, so I went overseas and I'm all by myself. I'm able to sort of get a lot of that out of my system to the point that I could even see certain truths that even originate from a Salafi. You know, you understand? You know, so but it's okay. Oh, he said it's true. That's all right. You know, he said it's true right there. You know, but I don't agree with him on this point, right? And at that point. But fundamentally, I think that's what all led to me not going down that particular road.
So what made you choose the methodology that you adhere to now, as opposed to other methodologies within the scope of Sunni Islam? So, Methalan, you say, like, you follow Ash'ari Maliki. Why weren't you Maturidi Hanafi or Maturidi Shafi'i, or why that particular system or structure?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably
the environment only.
Yeah, part of it's environment. Part of it is environment. No, but the other part of it is I just find it more persuasive. Just for me, that's what I understand to be Ash'ari Maliki. You know, I just find it more persuasive for me. I mean, there was a time I used to say that after the Maliki school, if I were to adopt another school, it will be the Shafi'i school, followed by the Hanafi school, then the Hanbali school last. You know, but then I found more information about the Hanafi school. Then I said, okay, now if I was in the Maliki, I'll be a Shafi'i, then I would be a Hanafi, right? And so the Hanbali.
Hanbali Hanafi switch or Hanafi Hanbali switch?
Yeah, the Hanbali Hanafi switch. You know, the switch over to the order between the Hanbali and Hanafis. I had the Hanafis at the end at first. You know?
You had the Hanafis at the end.
I had them at the end, right? So.
Abu Muwad is not going to like that. What made you put them at the end? Just curious. And then what made you switch them between the Hanbalis?
Yeah, I just learned to appreciate the Hanafi school much more. I learned much more about the usul and their their employment of like qiyas and among other things. So I just find it to be much richer. As a school itself, people can follow the Hanbali school if they want, but I just feel that that particular school, is very rich and there's a lot of intelligent people in it, but yeah, I think you get the point.
It's interesting. I mean, I know you got to go, Sayyidi, so we got to please immediately look in your schedule. You got to have part 2 where we go. No, because there's a lot of things these are discussions. I know some people, they don't have patience for them, but we have to get to where we pass this torch. We can't talk about it. We actually have to realize it, right? It's easy to say, you know what, Joker, you go your way, I go my way, and we're gonna die. Now what?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
we're gonna leave the next generation to repeat the same vicious cycle with no guidance. And I had a young person today tell me, I had no idea they were listening to me. Young person, very young. They said, I've been listening to you for almost a year. And I would have no idea that they were listening. But through these things, because I'm every day,
consistent,
they're listening. Right? Many of them. So what I'm saying, it would be destructive if I just have you see the world through my eyes. Maybe I need glasses, right? Maybe I do. I just don't wear them because I think I'm cool. But you understand what I'm saying? So first we got to find people who can handle it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we got to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not, I think like this. I remember you discussing, I didn't know your whole story, right? So you started when you was around 15, 16 years old.
Right.
I started when I was 10. Now both of us are leaders to some people. Teachers, people count on us.
Right.
And we're on our way out.
Yeah.
Right? So we got an experience of a long time in Islam. We got more in Islam than we had not knowing about the deen.
Yeah, right.
Both of us had experience overseas, saw a lot of things, traveled. We went through it. What are we going to leave for the next generation?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And now we need to, and I know you got babies and younger kids, and I got babies, and I'm thinking about them tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
I'm okay, I got my selfish self, what about them? And I think it would be a disservice to them to only see the world through my Islamic eyes.
Right.
When there's others who have ideas. Now there are some, I tried that with some that just don't work because sometimes we don't know how to differ.
Yeah, right.
And I want something for you to work on. I don't want anybody to steal it, but whoever beats to it wins, right? This book, remember I was telling you about this? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Have you ever saw this book?
Not that cover, I don't believe. Yeah.
But you know the title.
The Insaf book. Insaf. What does it say?
Nah, there you go. Right.
Fima. Yeah.
Yeah. Uthiru hawlahu al-khilaf.
Right. No. Okay.
Azhari treatise, right?
Right.
This is a beautiful book, right? I want you to read it. I'm gonna get you a copy. I have it. I just didn't get to send it to you. I want you to read it, and I want to have not on the next one. And I think this is something, you're a good translator, that would do a great service. You got to read it. You can edit it, summarize it, do whatever you want. But I think you should take a look at it. And I think we need this understanding. I've been reading this book. I've been through it. And I'm like, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. Sometimes the reading, we don't read enough. And we need reading. So I think this discussion is what we're talking about. Are to put things in context, because I see us and others like us as the Malcolm X's, Martin Luther King's, Elijah Muhammad's, Frederick of our time, whether we like it or not. Like Allah put you in the place you are for a reason.
Yeah.
You might not see it. I might not see it. Others might not see it. But there's a wisdom where you at and what you're doing. There's a wisdom for what I'm doing. Our job is try to understand as best as we can that wisdom and move it for a better tomorrow for the deen overall, for Islam.
Right.
That's not easy, but we have that mas'uliyah. You know, it's a matter on our necks.
Yeah, I agree.
So what are we going to do about it? And as I look the way we're traveling, we just make individual effort. This one failed. Then we start another one. We exclude this one, exclude that one, that one failed. And it's a repetitive, vicious cycle.
Right.
When we're intelligent enough to sit down and talk and work our way through this stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it ain't going to be painful. I'm not going to say it's not going to be difficult. But it's essential that we give it a try.
Yeah, I agree.
That's where I'm at with it. And I know it's not going to be popular to everyone. You know what I mean? But most of the things I say, most of the things you say are not popular to many people. So, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. I mean, I get it. Not just people think, well, his argument is with Selfies. No, I got Sunnis who don't like the way I operate, right? So it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, if we get to know one another and get to understand maybe why you feel the way you feel, then we'll find a ground by which we can.
But again, and that's about finding that common language. You know, it's common terminology, and it goes towards what you said about Aqidah. Right? You said that focus on Aqidah, have sound Aqidah, et cetera, and we can see just how what happens when you don't have a common vocabulary, when you just simply look like what's happening in the political realm, with the pronouns issue and all the transgenderism, all this crazy stuff that's going on right now, where people are just they're trying to change language, and words don't mean what they used to mean anymore. A man thinks he's a woman, he's a woman. So when you don't have a common language, which is actually, of course, at the roots, its basis is your aqidah, it starts there. Then you really can't move forward, and we should be able to have a common language in order to resolve our disputes too. So anyway.
So we reach. I don't want to hold you up no more. I do, but I know you got to go. So inshallah, if you have some closing words, and then close us out with dua, and promise that you're going to make some time for us to further have, because I didn't get to your books. I got some questions, and where is I put your thing up so people could follow you. Did I get it? Okay, there's your Lamppost. Is that the right? That's the link I saw. Lamppost education.org.
Yeah, that's right.
So those who would like to learn more about the work of Ustaz Shaykh Abdullah, please visit his website, and he has updates on there regularly as what he's doing. And really, I thank you for your time. I hope I was a good host.
Yeah, of course.
Trying our best, It's not an easy job, but somebody's got to do it. So if you give us some closing statements and dua, and we will go get some sleep.
Well, yeah, inshallah. So, of course, I don't want to keep people too long. I know you guys on the East Coast is a bit later than it's here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He comforts the hearts that have been broken. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He bring tranquility upon our hearts and unify our hearts in that which is good. He allow us to see that the greatest concern that we should have is a good return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala illuminate your hearts with Iman, our hearts with Iman, of course, not just yours, but all of our hearts with Iman and with certainty, and protect us from the evildoers in society and those who mean us harm and mean to corrupt our hearts and corrupt the hearts of our children. آمين. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين. بارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام. بيصير الأسرار الفاتحة.
الفاتحة.
بارك الله فيكم سيدي.
حياكم الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Yes, sir.